separation between church and state.
I hate to use the word delusional.
Over more wire than you could stretch across the continental U.S.
You're not allowed to discuss marsupials.
Chrysler Files.
Christianity is not a philosophy.
Good excuse to spend a whole lot of money, hey?
No one's trying to ban baseball bats.
Christian reactions to it. It's a total sick mindset.
Mental gymnastics.
Sounds paranoid. People disagree with that.
Really?
Welcome to the Left Hemispheres podcast. It's Friday, December 14th, 2012. As always, if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, whatever, you can email us at lefthemispheres@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, Twitter at Left Hemispheres, Google Plus, we're there too. With me today is Steve.
Hello.
Nick.
Hello.
Adam.
Hello.
And our guest this week, we have Martin S. Pribble from the Martin S. Pribble blog.
G'day.
Really?
Yeah, g'day, mate.
That's not a knife.
How are you?
Part of the global feel of this episode.
We're
We're recording over more wire than you could stretch across the continental U.S.
Yes.
Thanks for joining.
Literally on the other side of the world.
Yeah. It was like 14 hours ahead, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Than I thought
So,
it was.
Martin, are you aware of the Left Hemispheres podcast rules?
No, please tell me.
There's only one. You're not allowed to discuss marsupials.
Really, because I was going to talk about the danger of drop bears.
Well, I know you guys could barely contain yourself talking about marsupials. That's all I hear. But we're from America, and we have proper furry animals with placentas here, and I don't want to hear it.
We do have possums.
We have possums, but they're
true.
freaks.
It's the only thing that they. It's
Nobody-
the only thing
none
that
of the
they can
animals
talk
like
about
them.
that don't freak Americans out. I mean, they talk about marsupials, and they're cute and furry. Everything else in Australia is trying to kill you.
Well, except for Yahoo Serious.
No, he does that. He
He's trying to
poisons
kill
you
you.
from the inside. Well, we've got two mammals that actually lay eggs. So
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Spiny
the echidna and the the echidna and the platypus. So
Yeah.
And
We're just trying
the
to be
only
different,
mammal
really.
that has poison.
Not true.
yes,
Not
What else?
anymore.
Steve,
Oh,
What
they
other
just
mammal?
discovered
there's
a
an
new
article through the
primate.
Yeah, there's a primate with
Human
glands
beings.
on its elbows.
oh,
Yeah, it's in the Friday link dump. I put it, I believe. Or did I? Yeah, I think it's in there. It's like a slow loris, and it has like these glands on its elbows that it licks, and they secrete like a toxin, and then it licks the toxin, and so it like coats its mouth with the toxin. And then if it bites something, it's quite painful.
That's-
It's just identified.
All right.
And there's a lot less lag than I thought there was going to be.
oh yeah.
I was worried
Yeah.
that there was going to be latency like crazy, and I was just going to have a bit
This-
of a time cutting this, but
This,
seems like
this
it should
isn't
be okay.
This isn't 1998. It's
I've still got a 56K
Well, it's
motor.
not like it's not like the resistance value of copper got lower.
no, but there's a lot more fiber satellites.
Yeah, so
Maybe
it's,
maybe
if
it's
we
the,
lose the signal, it's because North Korea's satellite whacked into a communication satellite.
That's what I was just about to say.
Did you guys see that thing I posted on Facebook today about the North Korean satellite?
That gift was hysterical.
Oh man, it was from
Gizmodo.
Gizmodo, and when you open it up, there's a little GIF as the banner pic of a North Korean satellite, and it's Kim Jong Un's face with the satellite arrays around it floating around. It was fucking hysterical. I didn't even read the article before I posted it because the GIF made me laugh so hard.
I didn't read it either. I just opened it and saw that, and then that was it.
So yeah, I was just saying we were running around doing as much of the Christmas shopping as we could do. Went to a toy store and knocked over 14 kids' presents in one go, so that was pretty good.
Oh, that's good.
It's impressive.
Yeah,
Bang that out of the way, yeah.
yeah, good quality. Christmas. What do you call it? Toy store with lots of that wooden handmade stuff.
Oh yeah, cool.
Yeah, you gotta like that. Gotta like that stuff.
Yep.
It's a good excuse to spend a whole lot of money. Hey,
Hey, 'tis the season for capitalism, right?
it sure is. Sure is. So we're going to cover off with the shooting and stuff happening in the US, do you think, at some point? Or do we want to avoid that?
And of course, the big news here in America is the tragic shooting in Connecticut. So that sort of, took over the news cycle here, of course, as it would.
Because this is the first day we don't have a lot of information about it. Even by the time people hear this, there might be more information.
Yeah. Although, you know what? Probably not a whole lot. And, there's the 24-hour news cycle will inundate the shit out of everybody. I already thought it was disgusting. CBS was interviewing some of the kids that had run out.
What sort of a question would you ask a kid that's just... They
were asking them what happened, as if that really needs to be told by an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
I got home and I turned on the news, and that was the first thing I saw, and I turned the news off. I just couldn't. I honestly could not handle watching them do that.
Yeah.
Especially with what's his name from Family Research Council.
Yeah.
Blowing his crap out.
And Mike Huckabee as well. Blowhard.
Oh yeah, he's a moron.
He really is. I can't believe was a governor here. Although nothing surprises me anymore. Christian reactions to it.
Oh, the whole atheism's responsible. Why aren't they praying more?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Because they took God out of schools. So why are the people surprised when God doesn't protect these children?
Yeah, and of course Jack sent the Brian Fisher quote. God didn't intervene because he's a gentleman and he knows where he's not wanted.
Right.
I can't even. This is why I even hesitate talking about it. I know we kind of have to, but I just want to just go punch that fucker in the face, pretty much as hard as I can. I know that's.
You're welcome to it.
Yeah, I know. It's not something I would probably say in public too often. I don't generally threaten violence, but sometimes I'm just like, you fucking dicks. Poisonous bastards.
Gizmodo has a thing on right now saying if you politicize tragedy, no matter which side, congratulations, you're an asshole.
Yeah.
But what my major thing on this is that it's just one of the few things that I heard on the news about it is one of the news people, they're talking because they have to fill space because it's 24-hour news and they don't have any news, they don't have any new information, so they just keep talking.
Yeah.
And the guy's talking about like how rare it is, like to comfort your children by letting them know that it's rare, and it's like, well, it's kind of rare here, but it's not really rare.
No, it's not rare actually. It's
not
one this
that
year
rare.
Because we had kicked Jesus and God out of schools here in America.
And yet God is everywhere all the time.
Yes.
Right.
All I know is that's one hell of a sales pitch. If you want Christians to get on, if you want people to get on board with Christianity, you don't let God in schools. This is what's going to happen. I mean, it's a total sick mindset.
Completely opportunistic.
That's what they feed on.
Just for a second, imagine thinking that everything in the world happens with a purpose, and then having to do the mental gymnastics whenever something purposeless like this happens. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, he's going to, because people are asking him, what does this mean? How can this happen? I mean, he's thousands of people who are asking him personally.
That's where the whole, working in mysterious ways came from.
Right.
Originally, I'm sure of it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no other explanation for it. You look to see at all the horrible things that happen to people and ask the question, where was God at this time? And the only answer you can give is, well,
if something bad happens, then God works in mysterious ways, and we can't understand the purpose behind everything. He has his plan. But if something good happens, then God provides.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, he's responsible for every touchdown genuflect. But when it comes to the great evils of the world, then. Well, yeah, he has something else to do that day.
Mm-hmm.
And even though he's going to do whatever he wants, no matter what, you should pray, because then he'll help.
Well, he obviously gets off on the airtime.
Much like Brian Fisher.
Yeah. But people like Brian Fisher just they must just sit there and wait for something to happen, so that they can jump onto it straight away and say see and point their fingers and
Pat Robertson,
this is what happens when you don't do this or whatever. Yeah, Robertson's another one.
He's made his career out of that. See, I told you that if you don't follow God, then bad things are going to happen. See, I told you.
I hate to use the word delusional because I have a problem with making a blanket statement about belief. But when you have people like this, where their views about the entire cosmos are so incredibly narrow, it really fits the criteria. You have to be delusional. You have to have this narrative that you have to continuously create things to update to fit into this narrow little narrative, and it must be so incredibly exhausting.
Oh, I don't know. I think cognitive dissonance is a lot easier than people give it credit for, because it sort of sits in an area of mental laziness where people, when challenged inside their own brains, just go, I'm not going to think about that.
Yeah.
It's too hard. Why bother? I've got to go to church.
Yeah, see, I don't think it's, as Adam said, a constant updating, because they're not. It's nothing new. Mm-hmm. They're not thinking about the actual underlying causes of this, whether it's, whether it's guns, which is controversial, and then a lot of people will blame it on godlessness, as we're talking about, which is ridiculous, and then people will blame it on mental illness, which is sort of ridiculous in and of itself, because it just assumes mental illness is violent. Mm. Or it doesn't assume it, but it sort of paints it in that light, because that's the assumption that you have to be fucking crazy to do this, which is not really the case.
It's not. It's been shown not to be true.
Exactly. So
not in all cases. In a lot of cases, people are actually a bit unhinged, but in many cases, the person just doesn't know why, or they've just been pushed to a point where this seems like a rational thing to go forward and do. Mm-hmm. Or take as many people out with me as possible, because I've had enough, and whatever.
Right, but it's never crazy when people think crazy. They think somebody snapped and went off the deep end. It's never like that. It's always a very
they don't
planned.
Snap. It is.
Yeah.
Columbine, which was the first big one for the for the United States, was those kids were planning for 13 months to do this, to do what they did. That's not snapping.
No, that's not the actions of someone who's suddenly gone off the deep end.
Right.
No.
I mean, the entire idea of snapping of temporary insanity is generally rejected in the psychological community, from what I understand.
Well, right, because it's used as a legal term, but it's not a psychological term at all.
Right.
I mean, you can have a psychotic break, but a psychotic break is, it's quick. I mean, it's over 24, 48 hours. You know what I mean? Like, and I've unfortunately I've seen it. And it's not the kind of thing that you're not thinking clearly. You don't say, well, I'm going to go and execute this meticulous plan because of my psychotic break. No, you want to go to heaven and dance with John Candy. You want to make peace with Cuba. Like, that's how it goes. Like, it's, and obviously there's millions of different types of psychotic breaks, but they're not that clear. And this is just one of those things that, unfortunately, it's much easier for people to say that, well, this is just somebody on the fringe. This isn't some aspect of human nature that nobody wants to deal with. This is just one crazy person. Because then you can just dismiss it and say, well, there's nothing we can do, because there's always going to be crazy
people. There's nothing wrong with society.
Exactly.
It's
you could compartmentalize whatever was wrong with that one person and put it away, and then not be reflective on what the underlying causes are that may have pushed this person, or like culturally,
allowed this person somehow.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Allowed is a good word. Yeah.
But there it is that it's not rare.
Yeah,
it's rare. It's rare here.
It's I'll tell you where it's rare. It's rare here in Australia, and I'll tell you why too. Between 1981 and 1996, there were 13 mass killings in Australia, where you might have heard of a couple of them, but one in particular was in Tasmania in '96, and the government took the bold step of introducing very strict gun laws. And I put it to you, how many do you think have happened since 1996 in the past 16 years? Just have a guess.
In Australia?
Yeah.
3.
Lower.
I'll say 1.
0. Yeah. Not 1. Now, that's probably the most compelling case, because we're very much like America in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
But we don't have a constitutional right to bear arms. We had a government take the bold step of stepping in and taking these things away from us. And I mean, okay, now only the worst people have guns, and the police, which sometimes can be the same thing, and the military.
Mm-hmm.
But we have not had an out of control killing of that sort since 1996. And even people might still carry knives or whatever, but how often do you hear of a drive-by knifing or a
right? Yeah.
Well,
right.
Actually, today, oddly enough, I mean, it's not comparable, but today in China, some whack job went through an elementary school in China and stabbed 22 kids.
I saw that, yeah.
Although I don't think there were any fatalities.
That's probably the thing is with guns is that you can kill a person with a knife, but you can kill a whole lot more people and a lot more quickly with a semi-automatic or an automatic rifle.
Right.
And from a much further distance. You put yourself in harm's way when you're holding a knife. I seem to have thought this through too much, actually. if you're holding a knife and you're standing right next to someone and you go to stab them, then they have the chance to actually defend themselves, and you're in harm's way as well.
Right.
Well, it's much more personal with a knife. I mean, it sounds weird to say, but I mean,
it's harder.
In the U.S., the statistics show that in the U.S., the preferred weapon of violent crimes is the baseball bat.
Interesting.
Overwhelmingly, the baseball.
Is that just because of accessibility?
I mean, I assume so. I mean, no one's trying to ban baseball bats. They're not.
You can carry one anywhere. No one's really
right. They're not hard to get. And I mean, right. If you're carrying one down the street,
someone will think you're going to play some baseball.
Exactly. So it's.
But how many?
Whereas if you're carrying a knife, they're not going to assume you're a butcher.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But that's violent crimes. But,
it's a bit of a different animal.
How many of those crimes result in a fatality?
Or multiple?
Yeah.
Well, of course. I mean, there's the philosophical construct of having the right to bear arms in case we need to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government.
Yeah, it's all born from that. I mean, I agree.
But I mean, and how much that I mean is relevant. I mean, it's hard. It would be hard for us to say how true that idea is until the government would actually do something, right? And people would react with firearms. So it'd be hard for us to.
Now, I know we said we weren't going to solve this issue, but I do have a theory.
Okay.
You don't do away with the right to own guns, but you kind of handle it the way some of the states are trying to handle the marijuana thing. You can own a gun, you just can't sell one. So if you want a gun, you have to make it yourself.
Well, that's not going to be difficult. In what now?
I would severely cut down on
3D printers.
Like
3D printers. You can
3D printers. You can make guns.
Printers, and they work. And it's not even hard. You just watch. The ATF is going to be freaking the fuck out in about 6 months because people are getting 3D printers and they're printing off automatic weapons and they're firing them. They disintegrate after a couple of clips, but they work for a short period of time.
I guess as long as you've got a printer cartridge, you can print more.
Exactly. I mean, and these things are getting cheaper and cheaper. And I wouldn't want to see them try to ban 3D printers because that is going to be a great invention for.
Believe me, patent companies and copyright companies are going to try and do that soon enough.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, they're already freaking out all over the place about that anyway.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing.
Meanwhile, in China, they're buying up 3D printers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be increasingly more difficult to control such a thing, and it's sort of I know the rest of the world kind of looks at America with this like cockeyed look, like why the fuck do you allow this? But it's sort of it is an American mentality of if you ban something, it won't go away. And I know a lot of people disagree with that, but in one instance, and I'm just talking philosophically here, we're talking about legalizing or at least decriminalizing marijuana because there's no point in banning it. And now I'm not comparing marijuana to firearms; that would be stupid. But I'm talking about
that would be like comparing homosexuality to murder.
Well, yeah, that's Justice Scalia, which we can bring up later. I hate that dick. But I'm just saying, like, when you start banning something that's already prevalent, it's not going to go away. And I'm just bringing that up as sort of, part of a cog in the machine here of the way things kind of work in our weird country.
Especially in a country that has as much wealth as America. Where people that, if you have enough money, you can pretty much get whatever you want. And this is the place where people, unfortunately, or fortunately, have that money in a lot of cases. So it's not something that's going to go away.
I was just going to say the other thing that's interesting about the whole carrying of guns in the United States is the fact that a lot of people are actually doing it because of the amount of guns on the street.
Right.
Someone like Sam Harris talked about the fact that he carries a handgun or has a handgun because he thinks that he's potentially a target for terrorists or something, which fair enough, and he probably is too. Yeah. When he was here, he had 2 bodyguards following him around everywhere. They were unarmed, but they were big blokes, Yeah. And I can understand the philosophy behind, if everyone else has got one, then if I don't have one, then I'm just a victim waiting to happen.
Right. Well, and we have the problem here where if we're not producing weapons and they're not going on the streets, they're going to be coming up through Mexico. They are. If the general populace doesn't have access to the AR-15, to the general American assault weapons, then AK-47s will be coming up through our southern borders because there's no way to really stop that. There's too many miles of border and too many large criminal organizations south of the border.
Basically, Americans are going to get what they want.
But of course, that's facilitated by the illegal drug trade. So
yes, exactly. Well, yes,
really, 2 problems there.
Yeah. See, and this is why
the trade routes already there.
It's a cultural problem, not really a law problem.
Canada has guns; they're allowed to have guns for hunting. Canada doesn't have this problem.
But I don't know if they're allowed. They're not allowed to have the.
No, they're not.
But
you don't
numbers
hear about.
Well, that's Canadians have more gun rights than you would think. We tend to think down here that Canadians aren't allowed to own firearms the way that we own firearms, but that's not true.
That's just because they don't kill each other the way we do.
Correct.
It's a very emotional day here in America. You can't go anywhere. I listening to sports radio this afternoon. They were talking about it very briefly, and everybody that talks about it has that crack in their voice.
Right.
So we just want to extend our sympathies to everybody, and we're thinking about everybody, and it's a horrible day. I have a little kid, and I just couldn't wait to pick her up today. Yeah. That's really all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about my kids all day.
Yeah, they're changing all the security procedures at the daycare over the weekend.
Oh.
It sounds paranoid, but whatever. If they wanted to have Iron Man stand out there, I'd pay for it. I feel for everybody, and I know we all do.
Yeah, we do. Even over here on the other side of the earth. I really feel for you guys in the US, like though for the amount of religiosity that you have to actually put up with on a daily basis. We really don't have that here. We're quite secular, and give it with a bit of influence here and there in political spheres, and a couple of really just weird things happening in politics because of it. Completely out of proportion with the demand for it, which is weird in itself. We just don't have that. We just don't have the influence problem.
Yeah,
that you guys have.
It's interesting that the United States is fairly unique in that there was supposed to be this separation between church and state, yet we have become greater victims of it, of the interference in government from religion than a lot of the other countries that did not have that set up as an inherent part of their founding documents.
And do you find it interesting though that in the founding in the Constitution, the First Amendment is the one about religion, and the Second Amendment is the one about the guns.
Well,
which one?
I would say
they don't listen to both. I mean, one is not as important as the other, and that's that sort of points at the cultural importance placed on those two pieces of legislation.
In a lot of ways, I view the First Amendment, because it's not just about religion. I mean, it's more of a freedom of thought, because it includes speech,
freedom of the press,
freedom of press, and all that. So the first one is more, it's more of a freedom of thought, because religion is just a subset. That's the religion clause within the amendment. But then you contrast that with the Second Amendment, and going back to what we were talking about before, the whole thing is just totally born out of the way the whole country was, how it rejected the crown, and the circumstances of the time.
I mean, we also have, one of the Bill of Rights is harboring soldiers during peacetime, which is not a controversial topic at all.
Yeah. Right. It's actually one of my professors in college, poli-sci professors. A good friend of hers had a foundation set up for those who wanted to report violations of the Third Amendment to the Constitution.
Do we want to move on to the next topic?
Let's talk about it. Christmas.
Yay!
Christmas. Yes, Christmas.
Xmas. Well, in the last podcast, much like tonight, right before we started the last podcast 2 weeks ago, right before we went to record, was the infamous David Silverman and Bill O'Reilly bit, if you will, on Christianity is not a religion, it's a philosophy. I mean, that happened right before we went on. So we ended up talking about that for quite a while. I just wanted to touch on it because we said, we were talking after we went through this, and we were making fun of Bill O'Reilly, basically, that just watch, he'll backtrack in a day or two when one of his other guests comes on undoubtedly and says, and corrects him, that Christianity is not a philosophy. Yeah. And sure enough, Father Jonathan Morris.
Yeah, I couldn't remember his name. Father Douchebag is how I
basically refer to him. That guy's a dick. He was on O'Reilly's show, and he basically said, he interrupted him and said, that's a religion, right? And Bill O'Reilly went back and forth with him and basically cowed down to him and said, okay, it's a religion, but it's a philosophy that is being administered by different religions, which is another cop-out. And then Morris said, I couldn't let you get away with that.
Yeah, it's a religion because you're my guest and you're not an atheist. I just hit the reset button because nobody out in fucking zombie land is paying attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I just felt like we had to bring that up since it was such a large topic last time.
I saw the Penn Jillette did a video for Big Think last week, talking about the atheist war on Christmas, the touted atheist war on Christmas, and he brought up the fact that that Christianity is actually in America. It became a thing over time. Once upon a time, there was all these Baptists, and there was all these Protestants, and there was Catholics, and there was Episcopals, and there was this, and there was that, and at some point, maybe the 60s or something, I can't remember off the top of my head, it all got put under this banner of Christianity, and became a very strong force in the United States under the one banner. And O'Reilly's kind of right, but in what he said, administered by different religions. But to not call Christianity a religion is completely missing the point. Like, I've had people on Twitter saying, I'm not religious, I'm a Christian. And you just go, huh?
I've also seen a lot of those... what people don't understand is Christianity is not a religion, it's a relationship. Which is absolutely absurd.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's just a rationalization.
Christophiles, they call themselves. The brothers in Christ.
Well, I see people that label themselves Christ followers.
Christadelphians. They call themselves Christadelphians. And Christ or brothers, or
the whole Christianity under the umbrella in the 60s and the 70s was a politically expedient move in order to try to start. It's what jump-started the religious right movement.
I mean, the idea that there was ever a solid block of Christians and of a solid theology is a ridiculous myth. But
they're almost different gods.
Yeah.
Well,
The Catholic God and the Protestant God, or the evangelical God and the Catholic God, or
you could tell by the basic concepts, things like grace or fucking joy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about like a Southern Baptist church with joy, and then then go to a Greek Orthodox church. There's no joy in that place.
No. Everything's in a minor key. It's bad.
Well, yeah, and the way the Catholic Church operates is, it's an impersonable God, and in an evangelical Protestant in this southern United States and pretty much growing everywhere,
it's my God.
It's a very personal God, and when you get into a lot of this apostolic Reformation bullshit from the Dominionists, it's a very magical God. They're fighting demons because they're everywhere. And that sounds ridiculous, except for this is what they believe,
But that's a return to Catholicism for it.
The early,
exactly. It's Protestants return because you look at the stories coming out of like Poland with the Exorcists. It's a return to that magical idea that was held by the Catholic Church, which the Catholic Church has started. I shouldn't even say the Catholic Church, which Catholics, Western Catholics, has started to abandon in the latter half of the 20th century.
We have charismatic Catholics now, which sounds like a complete contradiction to me.
Well, it doesn't, and that's what that book, Onward Christian Soldiers by Hudson, was about. Was about charismatic Catholics. I could go on about that, but
although interestingly enough, you can no longer request to be removed from the Catholic roll.
Really?
Yeah, up until 2009, you could just write a letter to the priest of the church you were baptized at and say, "Don't count me anymore," basically. But they did away with that because I guess the attrition was too terrible.
Well, not only that, the true numbers of Catholics would be plummeting, no doubt.
Yeah.
Well, that's when it started. It started after the child molestation charges in Ireland came out, and Ireland started leaving the church in droves.
Which was an amazing thing, and that's for Ireland to have backlashed against the Catholic Church like that.
Well, yeah, it might actually be more on scale, might be more abhorrent and prevalent there than almost anywhere.
Yeah.
From a lot of the reports coming out of there. Although
every school is a Catholic school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's here, at least it's privatized.
Yeah, I don't know. Martin can maybe jump in on this. The Australian government is investigating, and now I know that they kind of couch it as they're investigating every level of society for child abuse, but I make the claim that, make no mistake about it, this is basically because of the Catholic Church.
Yeah, definitely. It's a royal commission, which is probably, I think it's the highest level of investigation that the government can order or ask for into the Catholic Church on the grounds of child abuse. Firstly, molestation falls under the abuse category at the hands of priests or whoever, people who are in charge of children. But it is actually, the way they've worded it is anyone who's in charge of children. So it can be child care centers, it can be youth groups, it can be the scouts, these sorts of things. But it was kicked off because of a story of a church that was around until I can't remember what decade, 70s, 80s, something like that. It might still be there. It's out in the hills of Melbourne, and there was, and again I can't remember the number, but there was a massive amount of people who've reported abuse at the hands of this church. For some reason 60 comes to mind, and a bunch of them have committed suicide. and a bunch have come forward. And like this all happened during the 60s and 70s, I think. And the Prime Minister had the guts on the day. She's had a lot of guts lately, hasn't she? To get up and just say, yep, we're going to do this Royal Commission. And of course Cardinal Pell. Cardinal Pell's the head of one of the churches. What is it? Is it Anglican? Head of the Anglican Church? I think. I could be wrong. Has said, oh, look, we can't be demonising. I think it was Pell. Look, I don't know who it was.
No, that sounds about, Australian Cardinal. He's Roman Catholic.
Roman Catholic, yeah. Demonising, you can't be demonising the Catholic Church over this. So that's why they came back with this second definition, which was anyone in charge of the care of children. But it's a bold move. The only thing is, I hope it doesn't go on as long as it has in Ireland, because if it's not solving any problems, or if it's not discovering new cases, or if it's not dismissing the cardinals or the priests or the whatever that are actually doing the harm themselves, then this could go on forever.
Yeah, it needs to have at least a stage 1 conclusion to report back on active abuse.
Yep. Active abuse
in order to stop it,
or known historical abuse, and actually maybe do some work to try and rectify not that you can, but to rectify the wrongs that have been done to these people. And of course, the Catholic Church has been shown to be a place where these people can hide, because the Church has actively or passively, actively hidden or passively done nothing about the claims, except for moving their people about, and they admit it.
Oh yeah,
they admit to it. They'll admit to it. Oh yeah, that's how we do it. That's how we do things. Not all of them will admit it, but they will. But it's interesting because this is again the same Prime Minister who panders to the Australian Christian lobby, which is about 100 people, and it literally is. It's not even a proper membership or anything. It's all by this guy. Wallace, who runs the thing, puts so much pressure on the politics by saying that they are the lobby of Australian Christians, and most Christians probably don't even relate to them or know who they are. But these guys get their head up, they get their hand in Parliament, and they get their hand into a lot of decisions made, like our compulsory religious education in primary schools, which is
your chaplains in schools, right?
School chaplains as well, which is a different thing again. We have compulsory CRE, which is an hour a week for primary schools, where a non-trained non-teacher comes in and basically babbles on about the Bible for an hour, and then it's up to the real teacher, who was in attendance at the time when has to be in attendance at the time that these kids get delivered their sermon for the week. The poor teacher has to spend the next 3 days undoing all that bullshit that they've been fed. But yeah, so it's an interesting time over here in Australia in terms of. But like I say, we don't have the same sort of influence in our daily lives as you do, from coming from religious people.
Well, it's interesting that, I mean, like my experience with I really didn't think back on it as this until later. As far as like a religious interference in my education. When I was in the 9th grade was when I had biology for the first time. The teacher asked about Sicilians, the worm-like creatures, and asked about them, and I said, well, they're vertebrates, but they're very primitive vertebrates, and evolutionarily they're kind of low on the scale. They don't have a true backbone, but they kind of do, and
notochord.
Right, they have a notochord, right. And then when I mentioned about evolution, he said, well, we're not going to get into that. I was 14, 15 years old at the time, and I didn't really
what class was this in? Biology class?
This is biology, right. This was in the basic biology class that you take when you're about 14, 15 years old.
I find that just horrifying that you could even attempt to teach biology without touching on the theory of evolution.
Which is like biology.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. They talked about the different classifications. They touched on the connectivity between the different groups, but they did not talk about evolution explicitly.
Yeah, I never really thought about that, but that's very true.
Really? See, Jack, a little background. Jack, Adam, and I all went to the same high school. A couple years apart. Jack's a little younger than Adam and I. Adam and I graduated together. I felt like our high school did a fantastic job of that. Maybe it was just my teacher.
Yeah.
I was like in my early 20s and in grad school before I realized that people really believed in creationism. I didn't even I had no concept.
I'll grant you that. It never even occurred to me to ask the question.
Because I didn't think anybody really believed that shit until I moved to Alabama for grad school. When I went down there, I know, but
higher education in Alabama?
Here I am. I'm a Yankee in Alabama teaching anthropology. And imagine my surprise when I went down there. I'm like, wait a minute, you were taught what? And therefore I was hated. But because my reaction was totally like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Because I had a fantastic science teacher in high school who talked about evolution as matter of fact. Because it is.
As it should be.
As it should be. And I thought our school district was I had no concept of how, I talked to some people I'm friends with now, other bloggers and whatnot, and, I'm shocked at what they learned in high school, because I thought our high school did a great job of being secular and science-based. And I don't know if it was just my teachers or what.
It's just but the actual discussion of how natural selection works didn't happen in my biology class.
Right.
I learned how to do electrophoresis, but we didn't actually do that, Like I learned to look at DNA markers, but we didn't actually talk about how one creature evolves into another creature.
Right.
I
learned that from the school library. Our school library from the time I was from elementary school, from primary school, was very rich in those topics, and that's where I really started. And this is where Ken Ham goes off about indoctrination. But in the libraries, there were the books there about Neanderthal and Cro-Magnon. And this was the '80s, so those terms were still right. Those,
you
right.
bastard.
Yes, I did. Yeah. So the evolution aspect was something that I already knew about because I had been reading about it for a number of years, and that was one of the things where when I mentioned that in that class, for my teacher to respond with, "Well, we're not going to go into that."
That's borderline. It is irresponsible, I think.
It is. It completely is. And
I had an interesting experience with this because I actually started in a more smaller town, more rural area before I moved to the same school as Steve and Jack. So
Jersey?
This is Bangor, Pennsylvania, middle of nowhere.
It was Maine.
No, there's a Bangor, Pennsylvania. Once you hit 3rd Street, you're out of town.
Yeah. But I remember distinctly the science teacher saying, "All right, we're going to talk about evolution. I recognize that this is a sensitive topic. We're not going to test on it. I'm required to teach it, but I understand that some of you might not want." He had this whole speech, which just made me lean forward. Some people don't even want to learn about this. I can't get enough of it. And he broke the whole thing down. It was my first real introduction to what it was. I had a general idea. I was probably in 7th grade. But it just made perfect sense. And he had even interjected his own, we don't know what got the process started. I believe that, that there was some kind of, basically he was a theist, and I believe that someone got the ball rolling, and then from there on, this is how the process worked. Which was enough for me, because that's, at the time.
It's almost a close enough statement for the high school to at least not proclaim close enough. That's good. Let's move on from there.
Right. Yeah,
that's how my parents are.
Yeah.
Thinking back on it,
they are.
In my school, even going back to the 7th grade, the 7th grade, I think, was actually the only time when evolution was explicitly talked about. And it was not actually in science class. It was actually in the social studies class for 7th grade, which was ancient cultures. And it started with Paleolithic man. And then moved... And then
you can't
moved
avoid it then, can you? You actually can't avoid it if you're going to talk about the advent of a social, Anyway, go on.
I remember very early on, and I found this strange because of having read the books that I had read when I was in elementary school that were readily available in the library. But I remember that class basically went from, at least from early hominids, basically up until European exploration. So, I mean, it was a rather large swath of time. But there were students whose parents requested that they not participate in the class during that period of time when we were discussing prehistoric man, because you could not avoid the topic of speciation and evolution.
I will say that even though we didn't discuss evolution specifically in context in science class, we did read and watch Inherit the Wind in my English class.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we did. Yeah, my class.
So did I, yeah, I remember that.
Which fleshes out the idea just fine as far as I'm concerned.
Is that the one about the Scopes monkey trial?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've still not seen it. I probably should.
I don't think I didn't read it or see it either.
It obviously it's dramatized.
Yeah.
But it's still a good movie to watch.
I actually, listening to your stories of what you were and weren't taught in school, I realize how lucky I actually am to have had a biologist for a father. A freshwater biologist, studied at Oregon State, and then we moved here when I was about 6. And when I went into school, stuff like evolution and biology and I knew so much about animals, and I knew about I actually didn't know that people didn't think that until I reckon I was in university, because everyone just thought that, and I was lucky enough to have this in me anyway, and we just never discussed it. Even in biology class, it just is assumed that everyone is on board with the truth.
Well, right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, I grew up, my stepfather's a minister, and I grew up with evolution being completely acceptable. And the thing was, they didn't even push theistic evolution. I mean, that wasn't even discussed. It was just evolution is fact in my house.
Because facts are facts regardless of who believes
them. Exactly.
Well, I grew up with a very working class family, but I was lucky in the sense that my parents, both of them had kind of studied on their own, and they both believed very strongly in the idea that education is not just what you learn in school for their children.
They just hang out in the library. Yeah, hell yeah.
Right. Yeah.
My parents were very educated, but they were always reading. Same thing. They didn't have that kind of classical education, but both of them constantly had books in their hands. Right. I don't know that either of them understood evolution in any detail, but it was just accepted. It was just one of those things, probably because it just makes logical sense if you can get your head out of the cloud. If you just look at
there's that thing. They came from the generation that actually trusted scientists before the evangelicals.
Before the distrust. Yeah,
exactly. Before the evangelicals started with the campaign of misinformation.
Right. And let's face it, a couple years before we were all born, somebody landed on the moon. You know what I mean? Like, science worked.
It's not just coming from the evangelicals, though. I mean, like I say, we don't have that sort of problem here in terms of religion invading all aspects of our life. But the distrust of science is a global problem, and it's not necessarily just coming from religious.
No.
Australia has a similar problem with the United States in that aspect with the anti-vaccine movement.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, you guys have it.
Yeah, Australia and the United States and the UK have horrible problems with
you guys have a big holistic thing, don't you? like
homeopathy.
Homeopathy.
Homeopathy, yeah, homeopathy. We've got a huge push
prevalent over there than it is here.
Right,
not that it's not here. And for fuck's sake, let's not get Nick rolling on vaccines again. We don't need another 20-minute, goddamn fuckers.
Staccato diatribe.
Yeah. To make it easy,
fuck yourself.
To make it easy, just point the listeners to the World Health Organization. They can look it up themselves.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
Guys, I just wanted to say at this point, I'll probably have to lash off in about 10 minutes. So I don't know what you want to do. Do you want to just keep going or?
Well, let's see. Let's the topics that we want to discuss here.
The gay weddings thing could be significant because there's been some interesting developments within your own government with the idea of gay marriage. I brought that up because I had criticized your openly atheist head of government for supporting women and attacking the opposition, but for not supporting the other second-class citizens of the GLPT community.
Yeah.
In a previous post.
Yeah. Well, Prime Minister Gillard, as I like to call her, because that's her name. Not as the opposition like to call her Julia, although that's also her name. But yeah, it's funny because she's not coming forward as she comes forward as an open atheist, but doesn't do anything that that any of us would relate to as being atheist. In fact, she tends probably to be she's probably the world's best atheist Christian, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
The SE Cup type.
Yeah.
Can't stand that one either. But I was just going to say the one of the strangest things about the whole gay marriage thing in being brought forward before Parliament here is that one of the ministers in her cabinet is actually a lesbian. Her name's Penny Wong, and she has a lesbian relationship where her partner recently had a baby. When it came to the vote, however, in Parliament on whether gay marriage would be allowed, Penny Wong had to toe the party line and vote against it.
Really?
Wow. Which has been a topic of conversation, you might say.
Wow.
And it's very strange because you've got your president coming forward and basically backing the rights of homosexuals in the United States, and yet an atheist prime minister with gay parliament members is too afraid of the Australian Christian lobby to back something that should be a basic human right.
Yeah.
And it has no effect on anyone except for those who get married. So, it's a very odd situation.
What's even odder? The U.S. president is a Kenyan Muslim who is supporting gay rights.
Who would have thought a Muslim would come forward
and do that? It's all part of Sharia, don't you know?
Fatwas abound right at this point.
I love the accusations of Sharia in the same breath of allowing homosexuals to marry. It's just so absurd.
Well, that's because he's an atheist Muslim.
Or as Newt Gingrich would call it, the secularist agenda that will allow fundamentalist Muslims to take over.
I thought we had that article on here, but we don't. The one about whoever it was who said that, no, it was a different article that I read today, but there was an article that basically said that atheists should admit it and say that they don't just have a problem with all religions, they have a problem with Christianity specifically.
Oh, yeah.
I sent that out. That was Crescat from Patheos. Patheos. However the fuck you say.
That to me just seems like it's an extremely limited bubble to America.
Yeah,
because Christianity is...
Well, that fits into the religious privilege topic.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that atheists coming out of Egypt don't particularly hate Christianity more than any other.
Exactly. I'm sure
it's all of what you know.
Yeah.
Right. Indonesia, and you're exactly right. It's
atheists in Iran probably complain about Islam a lot.
Yes. And I would imagine that atheists
very quietly to themselves.
Atheists in the Maldives are very much the same way if they don't find themselves strung up from a tower at the airport.
Yeah, it's all about what type of apostate you are.
But they actually play into. I mean, you actually hear that argument from Christians, where it's just, well, if we were Muslims, we'd be killing you for saying that, and that's supposed to make it better that you're a slightly less oppressive oppressor.
That's like them telling us.
Well, thank you, Christian, for not killing me. I appreciate that. That's so nice of you.
I am glad you've decided not to
thank you for
crusade against. You still think I'm a second-class person, but at least you don't think you should kill me.
Thank you for observing the Yuletide greetings of not killing me for being a fucking apostate. You goddamn son of a bitch.
Very good.
So there's that.
Yeah, right.
Well, Martin, thanks a lot for joining us. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do it again. If you'll have me.
Please. Oh, absolutely.
If you happen to see him, say hello to Yahoo Serious for me. I really did appreciate young Einstein. I did.
Most nonsensical.
It was amazing how he, fermented beer and carbonated it, through the process of nuclear fission.
You know that it's actually based on the real life of Albert Einstein. He was a mad professor. He was crazy.
Anyway, thanks, Martin. We would definitely love to have you back, and maybe we can schedule it to be even later at night for us so you could drink.
Yeah, well, anytime after 4 o'clock is good for me on a weekend. And in fact, that's what I'm going to go do. And also stop ignoring my girlfriend who's been wrapping presents for the last 2 hours.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See ya.